The story of England begins not with unity, but with chaos. A land divided, its people fractured among rival kingdoms, and its future uncertain. Centuries before the notion of a single English nation took root, the shores of Britain were home to competing dynasties descended from Germanic tribes, the Angles, Saxons, Jutes, and Frisians. Following the withdrawal of Roman armies in the early 5th century, these peoples carved out distinct realms within the island's green expanse. By the 7th century, 7 major kingdoms, Wessex, Mercia, Northumbria, East Anglia, Essex, Sussex, and Kent, had emerged. Sometimes one rose above the rest, the so-called Bretwalda, overlord of the English, but all remained wary rivals, each guarding its own traditions, accents, and ambitions. Yet peace in this land was always fragile. In the distant north, on a holy island called Lindisfarne, in the year 793, monks busied themselves by candlelight, quietly preserving knowledge in careful script. Their world seemed far removed from violence. Then, the horizon darkened with the shapes of unfamiliar ships, sleek, serpent-headed longships. The monks, assuming they were traders, welcomed them with the naivety of a people who had never seen a Viking. In moments, that illusion shattered. Storming ashore, the Norsemen brought blood and fire to Lindisfarne. The raiders stripped the monastery of its treasures, sacred vessels, and precious books, but more than silver was lost that day. The chronicles recall harrowing omens, lightning, angry skies, and fiery dragons streaking overhead. The Vikings had come for wealth and for slaves, launching a century of terror that would haunt the coasts and riverways of England. For years the raids continued, swooping down with little warning, striking with overwhelming speed and brutality, then vanishing back out to sea. But in 865, the tide changed. The threat was no longer mere raids, it was conquest. The chronicles call it the arrival of the Great Heathen Army. Their purpose was not simply to plunder, but to claim land, install their own rulers, and reshape the map. Legend holds that they came partly in revenge, the sons of Ragnar Lodbrok, mythic Viking king, avenging their father's death at the hands of the Northumbrian king Aella. These sons, Ivar the Boneless, Ubba, and Halfdan, commanded thousands of warriors, more organized and determined than any previous force. They swept west and south, claiming York, seizing East Anglia, battering Mercia into submission. Saxon armies fell, kings died or became fugitives, whole regions fell under Scandinavian rule. Archaeology has revealed vast Viking campsites stocked with horses, weapons, and supplies, evidence of a powerful, sustained occupation. After a decade of war, only a tangled land in the southwest stood free. Its name was Wessex. It was then, when hope seemed lost, that a new king appeared. His name was Alfred. Young and thoughtful, and yet dogged by frailty and pain, he took the throne of Wessex in 871, at just 21, inheriting not only a coronet, but a war that seemed unwinnable. For years he clung to power as best he could, paying off Viking armies with tribute, fighting when he must, retreating when forced. The Viking menace was implacable. The safety of crops and kin depended on treaties that broke as quickly as they were inked. Yet Alfred endured, insisting that the core of his people and kingdom would not be extinguished. But when the blow finally came, it was as sudden and devastating as any storm. In the winter of 877, Alfred celebrated Christmas at his estate in Chippenham, believing that peace, however uneasy, had been secured. But under cover of darkness, the Danes attacked, smashing through the gates. Panic swept through the settlement. Alfred, barely escaping, fled with a handful of loyal followers into the marshy wilds of Somerset, an outcast in his own land. It was his darkest hour. While the Danes celebrated their triumph, Alfred carved out an existence amid the reeds and cold waters. Here in Athelney, he fell back on the oldest strategies of survival, hit-and-run raids, guerrilla tactics, using the land itself as an ally. He struck out at Viking-friendly estates, intercepted scouts, hassled supply lines, slowly eroding the confidence of an enemy accustomed to easy victories. All the while, messengers slipped through hedges and woodlands, bearing the word of the king's struggle and summons for aid. Spring brought renewal. In April 878, as the earth woke from winter's hold, so too did the hopes of Wessex. At Egbert's Stone, in a remote corner of the countryside, Alfred was joined by the men of Somerset, Wiltshire, and Hampshire. Peasants left their crops, blacksmiths shouldered hammers repurposed as weapons, and thanes led their household troops. For the first time in years, an English army gathered, united not by regional rivalry, but by the will to survive. Burning with defiance and faith, Alfred marched to reclaim his kingdom, drawing his forces up against Guthrum and the Danes in the fields near Edington. Across the churned soil, the two armies faced off, each knowing that this battle would decide far more than borders. Alfred relied on organization and discipline, his fyrd, or citizen militia, drilled to hold the line in the old Roman style, locking shields and presenting an unbreakable wall. Against them, the Vikings unleashed berserkers, men driven to frenzy, axes swinging, the stuff of legend and horror. The Battle of Edington was no swift skirmish. For days the shield walls clashed, the air thick with fear and fury, men struggling in mud and blood. At last, the tenacity of Alfred's troops began to tell. Where the Vikings fractured, the Saxons held. Where fear lurked, discipline prevailed. As the Norse lines buckled, Guthrum and his warriors retreated to their fortress at Chippenham, beset and besieged. 2 weeks later, starving and demoralized, the Vikings sued for peace. But here, Alfred delivered not just victory, but transformation. He demanded that Guthrum convert to Christianity. In a solemn ceremony, the pagan warlord kneeled before the king, was baptized as Æthelstan, and set the stage for a fragile coexistence. The treaty that followed drew a line between the two peoples, the Danelaw for the Norse, the lands south and west for the Saxons. With peace, Alfred began to rebuild. He fortified his kingdom, founding burhs, walled towns intended as sanctuaries and strongholds against future invasions. He supported learning and law, inviting scholars from across Europe, commissioning translations, raising the intellectual spirit of his people. More than a century of struggle followed, as his heirs, Edward, Athelflaed, Athelstan, pressed the advantage, chipping away at Viking-held lands. In time, the disparate realms became one. Alfred's grandson, Athelstan, would become the first king to claim sovereignty over all the English, forging England from the fires of war and the ashes of old rivalries. Where terror and chaos had once divided, unity and purpose now prevailed. Today, on the site of Edington, a monument stands, recalling the battle's significance. King Alfred the Great defeated the Viking army, giving birth to English nationhood. The story of England is a tale of darkness and resilience, invasion and renewal, risk and vision. One winter's night in the marsh, a fugitive king began the long struggle that would change a people and a continent forever. In May 878, the idea of England, united, enduring, and fierce, was born. And that legacy, forged in the clash of shield walls and the courage of the desperate, endures to this day. If you enjoyed this historical journey, please support our channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to click the bell icon.